Okay, welcome back to our learning in the Hishtapchut HaNefesh. We're going to continue. Last week we had one of those amazing, what's called manias, obstacles that seem to happen ever since I've been working with these types of concepts and spiritual relationships, deepening the relationship with Hashem. See all these obstacles, and one of them that happened was last week. The recording of what we went through disappeared into cyberspace. I have no idea where it went. So there are people who were looking forward to hearing chapter 70, and so what I'd like to do is just give a very quick synopsis of chapter 70, and then we'll go on. We did actually a little bit of chapter 71 last time, so we'll start from the top, from chapter 71, and but I'll give a synopsis of 71st. And the first will make it kashrut hareini mikasher atzmi. בעצמנו בלימוד תורה זה לכל הצדיקים האמיתיים אשר בדורנו לכל הצדיקים האמיתיים שאופני עפר קדושים אשר בצאם קרא דמנו קדוש צדיק יסוד עולם נחל נביאים כל חוכמה בין נחמן בנפגן נחמן מיומנס פסם יגן עלינו לכל ישראל amen. May it be your will, Hashem, that it's good learning. It's learning we should you should send healing, complete and speedy healing to all of the sick people in Am Yisrael, amongst them Chaya bat Bea, Tila Racha bat Sarah, Enyarata bat Itaratza, Yosef ben Genya, and all of Am Yisrael, that's whether they're in a physically ill, spiritually ill, emotionally ill, please Hashem, heal us all, and send Yeshua's total of Am Yisrael, and free us from all of our imprisonments. And it's appropriate that these are the types of things we ask for when we're learning about prayer, because that's really some of the most important things that we can do with prayer is to beseech Hashem for healing and wholeness, and when we're talking about healing and wholeness, we're talking about not just that there's no physical ailments or no emotional dysfunction, Lo Aleinu Hashem should spare us, but rather freedom from the enslavement of the Yetzer Hara, freedom from the enslavement of physicality. How are we going to achieve that? There's no way to achieve it. There's no way to achieve it except through prayer. People, especially in our time, we're so bombarded by a feel-good and quick-fix society that to apply the consistent effort that would need to overcome bad habits, it's very, very tough. Even with prayer, it takes some time. It takes repetition. We have to be encouraged. So I bless us all that we should take these words seriously to heart and to be able to come to true prayer and see ourselves improve from level to level and find healing in our world. And Kenya and Sons, we started a little opposite forum, a little opposite today. Going in we start with the end bracha. Just so that we have a time frame for when this is for people who are going to be seeing it. This is being recorded on the was it the 22nd of Sivan, I think? Was it the 22nd of Sivan, the 9th of June, in the year 5755? Okay. So 70, chapter 70, Ayin, basically talks about the aspect of completion of the holy tongue. In other words, the holy tongue is the ability to speak words of holiness. It includes all the different types of holiness, that not only words of Torah and words of Psalms and words of halacha, learning, things like that, those are all part of it, but also the words of Hitbodedut are part of the word, even though if we're not speaking in Hebrew, it's like Rebbe Nachman teaches, the main Hitbodedut is in your own language, that way, the way you understand, the way you relate to, the way your heart's connected to. So he's talking about that the idea that completing the holy tongue includes all these different parts of speaking holy words, and he says is also related to, and we talked a lot about the idea of how fixing the speech is related to rectification of sexual purity and the sexual covenant, the relationship we have with Hashem that He gave us through sexuality. And so that's basically the synopsis of 70. 71 is going to take that idea further, and it says like this: Kol echad k'fi tikun habris k'fi iskashru sol tzedikei emes she'Hashem shom levus. Every single person, according to his level of rectification of the sexual covenant called bris milah, and according to the level of his connection to true tzaddikim. The true tzaddikim are the shomer bris, are the ones who are the epitome of keeping guarding the covenant. And one thing I also mentioned last week that was good to repeat, and that is that shomer bris also includes the eyes, the thoughts, and the mouth, as we're talking about. So it's all the different things that what we let ourselves see, what we let ourselves think about. Okay? Besides just in guarding against having seminal emissions and guarding against becoming sexually aroused when there's no outlet for that energy, as in the holiness of marriage. So all those aspects have to do with the idea of tikkun, or first there's the idea of guarding the covenant, being shomer habris, and then once the person has achieved shmirah, where he no longer lets himself fall into the defilements that happen in sexuality, once that person has achieved shmirah, then there has to be tikkun. Tikkun is going through and doing the tshuva and feeling the pain of the bitterness of causing darkness in the world, and it's probably a good idea to mention, since we're talking about the whole Indian of Shmiras of Bris, of guarding the covenant, and Tikkun and Bris, of rectification of the covenant. It's probably a good idea in our time, because we know that in the rest of the world, people who are watching this that may not be as familiar with this idea. And I know me personally, when I first came to these ideas, it was a little bit hard to accept that the main way of serving Hashem is through sexuality. But the reason for this is very deep, and because the rest of the world says no, sexuality is normal and natural, and you're supposed to go ahead and express yourself sexually. But what they don't understand, and then what I started to understand much more once I started learning Kabbalah, especially, was to understand how when light is coming into the world, there needs to be a vessel, there needs to be a way for that light to be received. And whatever light, spiritual light that comes into the world that is not received by a vessel, gets received by the forces that oppose light, the forces of darkness, the forces of tuma, of spiritual impurity. Because everything in the world is created by Hashem from infinite light, because infinite light, or Ein Sof, is the ultimate unification of everything. So even the forces of evil are created by infinite light and are nourished by that light of holiness. And so what happens is, when the light comes into the world and we do not receive it because of either not making the proper vessel by our actions, or not refraining from certain things that cause broken vessels not to not be able to receive this light comes in and it nourishes those forces of darkness. And what those forces of darkness do, amongst other things, is cloud our awareness. And so we become less and less aware of Hashem's presence, and it becomes more and more difficult to be able to maintain awareness of Hashem when you're going about your daily business. So that's the idea. And when we learn that the spiritual underpinnings of zera, of sperm, is that the sperm is white because it's the same color that of the upper part of the brain. And it's taught that the zera, the seed, is actually drops of brain, and that that's the light, because the brain is the aspect of what's called the mochin, which is the upper part of the initial place where Hashem started making the infinite light into more and more coarse, we'll call it, bodies of light, which are called the mochin, which are very high and very exalted, but not as pure as the actual or Ein Sof. So these mochin come down in each place, in each level, one world to the next, until they reach physicality, and they manifest as our brain, and all the things that go on in the brain. Now that is why when a man has relations, it's taught that he should have godly thoughts in his mind, that he should have godly thoughts and thoughts of desire for Hashem, that will be conveyed to the children. So when a person has lustful thoughts, they'll oftentimes see, and it's something to pay attention to. I noticed myself when I first learned these concepts, that I can look at each of my children and recognize in them, and I'm sure that anybody has children can recognize and think about when they were conceived, what was your consciousness like? Where were you? And I can see in each of my kids very clearly where I was in my consciousness at the time my child was conceived. So that's what happens. The consciousness gets transmitted, and if it's received in a vessel of holiness, which is the yichud of nisuin, of kiddushin, of marriage, then there is a holy vessel to receive it. But actually, and you should know that there are the laws about sexuality are just like all the laws. There are two types. There's laws that are derisa from the Torah itself, and then there's laws that were formulated derabanan to provide fences against the possibility of transgressing the more serious laws that are from the written Torah itself, and the actually I shouldn't say the written Torah, but the Torah Moshe Sinai, all the laws that Moses received at Mount Sinai that were transmitted very carefully. Then the rabbis were given instructions by the Torah to make fences. So in sexuality, there's the whole aspect of marriage. What we do now as marriage is mostly is rabbinical, but it's based on three different ways that the Torah says that a man and a woman come together in a union. And the Torah says there are three different ways. What the rabbis did is they said we're going to do all of those three, and so that's what we do. Well, the three ways are. First of all, giving a monetary exchange. That's simple. That we do with the ring. Then there's the marriage can be contractual, and that's the ketubah. It's a shtar. Actually, I don't know if the ketubah is really considered the marriage contract. It's more the contract that what the woman gets when she, if God forbid, there's the marriage ends. But it's a contract. It's an agreement of being married. So that's the shtar ketubah, and then there's the actual intimacy. And according to the Torah, the original Torah, that's intimacy, having an intimacy with a woman who's fitting to be your wife. In other words, the Gentile woman is not fitting for a Jewish man. So if he has intimacy, he's intimate with a woman on a certain level of absolute truth, they're married, right? So I'm not going to get into. It's very complicated. What if you have been intimate? Do you need to get? It's simply said. It's not done that way, because the rabbis made it a decree and a formulation that the marriage would include all three of those things. So we give the ring, we have the ketubah, and then the couple goes into what's called the cheder yichud, the room of intimacy, and that is the way all those three things are brought together. Anyway, the point is that the sexuality in that place has its vessel. So even when even if the person is has relations with a woman, and even if they're not officially married, still it's as far as pure holiness, as far as giving power to the other side, it's far less a damage than, for instance, the male that spills seed, God forbid, or when having relations with a non-Jewish woman, or improper relations, and with a nida, with a woman, a Jewish woman who is in her state of menstrual spiritual impurity. So all these things are very amazing ideas, and can be a little difficult for a person who's just coming into these things. It can be challenging. So if you're challenged by these ideas, if these sound strange, if they bring up some resistance, what I invite you to do is pray. And if you're coming to learn about Hishtapchut and HaNefesh, if you're here because you want Hashem, and you're coming wanting to come closer, then what you do, don't give up just because you heard something that's a little strange and hard. You come to Hashem and you say, God, I heard this idea that there's this thing of sexual purity, and I don't know how to relate to it. Please guide me, give me true, holy, good advice, and help me learn so that I can go according to your will. And I pray that way to this day, asking Hashem for truth all the time, because I don't know. I could be following all this. I mean, even though I really believe in Rebbe Nachman's his being who he said he was, but did a lot of work to come to that. And even once I believe in that, I still hear people who are saying things like whatever they say, and so therefore, in case that when there's a little doubt that comes up, because I'm still far from a totally refined person, so I hear these things, a little doubt comes up, so I go back and pray Hashem, say, Hashem, if there's anything not true about following Rebbe Nachman's advice and relating to him according to how he says I should relate to him, please show me clearly, because how can I possibly hope to come to truth unless you show me? Because I'm blind, we're all blind, and it's easy to believe something that's not true. Okay, so that's the type of thing you want to come to. If you're serious about your relationship with Hashem, you always want to be praying like this, because this world is upside down, and we don't know anything. Okay, so back to the text. Was that a good clarification for you? Was that helpful? Good. All right. Anything? Do you have any questions or comments before you go on?
Oh, what did you say was worse in terms of the Fogan Brick scale? What was the order?
What's the worst thing? Shicha zer levatala is what is the worst thing?
Is that doing worse than maybe?
It's to spill seed wastefully. It's really you wouldn't think so, right?
It's worse
You
than
wouldn't.
being with Gentile or Nida?
Well, no, because Nida's also. I think probably we'd say maybe Nida's equally as bad. Hashem yirachem alai. As I've told you many times, I'm not a Talmudic or a halachic scholar to the point where I would be able to know these things and say them 100%. But I do remember, in the past I've learned some of these things, and it seems to me from what I remember that Nida and Shikvat Zera Levatala are equally damaging. They both are. The punishment for both of them is correct. And by the way, what is correct? That's as long as we're on the subject. Let's so because the punishment, how a person, the consequences. We translate onish as punishment. The word onish is translated as punishment, but it really means ayin nun shin. The letters of ayin stand for olam, which is world or space. Nun stands for nefesh, which is person. And shin stands for sha'ah, which means time. And that's the three interactions that we have in our world. Is we interact with everything in each moment according to person, place, and time. So therefore, there's a rectification. The onish is a rectification for whatever damage happened in the realms of person, place, and time by that action or inaction that led spiritual damage, powering the other side, decreasing awareness of Hashem. That's what onish. So what's the onish? What's the onish? It's called karet. Karet, cutting off. What does that mean? So if there's a computer network and a computer gets a virus in a network, okay, they have to pull out that computer before it can spread the virus. If they can do it, they've saved the network, and that computer gets pulled out, right? And the rest of the network can continue to function. So that's the idea here. When a Jew who does something that causes such spiritual darkness, there's a resonance that can affect the entire nation. So on the highest level, there's that spirit, that soul is disconnected from the network. Okay. Now, it used to be, according to what I understand from Rebbe Nachman, it used to be that once disconnection was happened, there was no way to fix it. And Rebbe Nachman teaches that the main work of the tzaddikim is their compassion for all of Am Yisrael, and trying to help Am Yisrael come back to their Father. So Rebbe Nachman realized that there were all these damaged souls that were in limbo, and he did whatever he did to be able to create new bridges and channels to be able to bring these souls into their completion. And so that's what he discovered, Tikkun Klali and all these things. So it used to be that the karet, the spiritual cutting off that would happen as a result of blemishing of sexuality, and the severe blemishing, used to be irreparable. And now it's Rebbe Nachman came and says, I figured out how to fix it. You got to do tshuva. You say you have to go to the mikveh. You have to say tikkun klali, and that doesn't give us license to go ahead and do this. But we have to understand that in our time, everything's getting fixed up. So in the meantime, so we have to understand more and more. Well, what is this whole idea about guarding the covenant in order to serve Hashem? Because that's the ultimate place we're going to come back to as when Mashiach comes at Yimei Rav Yimenu. So those two things are correct, and so they're probably we'd probably say that they're equal, as far as that goes. Being with a woman that's not fitting is makot, is a lav. So it's not nearly as and by the Christian world, we have this idea that it's terrible if he was with somebody not in marriage, right? That's the worst thing according to the Christian world. That's not Torah. The worst thing according to Torah is God forbid damaging the seed, spilling the seed, or being with Anita, or also any of the other types of abominations that are mentioned as well, being with incest and things like that. Those are also cause quite a bit of damage. But just being sexually active while not being a great thing to do spiritually is not nearly as damaging. And again, this doesn't mean I'm giving anybody license for saying, but Moshe Newman said it's okay to have sexuality without marriage. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we have to be real and understand put things in perspective. Okay. So according to the level of rectification of sexual purity, and according to the level of connection to true tzaddikim, and the tzaddikim are the epitome of those who guard the sexual purity, sexual covenant. Says that according to that level, that's how much you can taste the sweetness of prayer. Okay? And then he says, and he explains, brings a statement that this from the Sikun Zohar. He says, "Va'az aryeh nachis lechol korbanon." Then an aryeh comes down to eat his sacrifice, hainu tfilaso, and we know that the korban is sacrifice. That the main manifestation of the sacrificial offering is in the prayer and our giving over our heart and our soul to Hashem through our supplications and our yearning to come close. So when a person has this tikkun bris, and when a person has connection to the tzaddikim, and he prays and he experiences the sweetness of the prayer, then the spiritual lion eats the spiritual power of that prayer, raises it up in so doing, because that the spiritual light is from the highest place. Okay, and that's the opposite of what happens when we talked about to empower the other side, because that's what al aval. He says, however, al yedei pegamabris hu b'chinas mayim merirlin. So when there's a blemish in the bris, when we damage our covenant, that's the aspect of bitter waters. And bitter waters is the actual feeling of bitterness. And it's talked about that the black bitterness of spirit, it's called mara shchora, that people experience, is mainly elicited in the world through improper sexuality and through improper emission of seed without the proper vessel. So that's the bitter waters. Va'az, and so when a person has blemished his bris and is experiencing the aspect of the bitter waters, and so therefore does not taste the sweetness in prayer. Then a spiritual dog comes down, and just like a dog eats from the garbage in the street, so your prayer is tainted, and it doesn't have the same effect. Now, that does, again, where he's going to say this, and it's important to know. So what does that mean? That it's no good that I shouldn't pray if I fell with my sexuality, if I blew it? Does that mean that my prayer is not worth anything? No, chas v'shalom, God forbid. Prayer is always an amazing thing, and very precious. And as we're going to see, we're going to see that it's precious that when a person tries, even when they're not tasting the sweetness of the prayer, and they still try to pray, he says that's extremely precious in heaven. So he says like this: "V'da, and know this, that the sheza'azeh panim sheyesh b'dor hem klavim v'haomdim v'achukim al tfilaso shel ish Yisraeli." There's sometimes, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, if you've ever really let yourself be just let go completely in your prayer, and you're in a minyan, and you let yourself clap your hands and moving and whatever else, and making noise, whatever else, if you're really involved in your prayer, there will be sometimes people who will start mocking that, to make fun of it, or it's unfortunate but we have, we've broken things in the world, broken things in Am Yisrael, and there are people who denigrate this and try to distract that person from his sincerity, probably because they feel deep inside, they feel ashamed of themselves that they don't pray like that, so they can't stand somebody else seeing somebody else. Anyway, so what has happened, they've descended to the level of like spiritual dogs, and so they come and they gobble up that power, because what are they doing? They're distracting that man from his prayer, that woman from her prayer, in a way that is making the light that was accessing and the consciousness of Hashem, it's diminishing and damaging it. And so these are the people that they themselves have had blemish in their bris. Maybe not necessarily sexually, but because of what they think and how they see the world, those types of things. Any type of anger is also an aspect. Any type of anger and improper judgment are also aspects of pagama bris, of blemishing the bris. So this is what happens when a person, he himself, has not made a proper rectification in his spiritual, in his sexual covenant. And Rebbe Nachman is in the book called Collection of Advice, in the section on prayer, says like this: and from this we can understand how great is the sin of those who come up against the prayer and to distract or to interfere with the prayer of a Jewish person. And they want to confuse and distract from his prayer. There's Chaim, you got in there, good. Okay, welcome. Chaim David's here. Is Chana still here? I don't know if Chana's still here now. All right. Hashem, I don't know what to say.
I'll call you back.
Well, no, don't do that. Don't do that. You stay right where you are. Don't you got this thing messed up, so now you're going to stay there. By being late, brother. Don't be late. Oh, there she is. She's here. You are here. Chana, you here? Speak. Chana.
I'm here.
Okay, fine. Chaim David, you're here?
I just have the volume off so you can't hear me.
Okay, great. Chaim David, you here? Chaim David, are you here?
Hello, Chaim David.
Are you here?
I don't know where he is.
All right, I think you're both here. Fine, we're going on.
I'm turning my volume up so I don't distract you.
Good job. Okay. Ki af al pi shezeh ha'ish ha'ishtispalel lo zacha adan l'tikun bris. Because even though the person that's davening still may not have achieved the level of complete rectification of the bris, and because of that, that's why people are coming against him and distracting us from his prayer. Shehi bechinas kal banach, says, we said this is the aspect of a dog coming down to eat his offering. Aval ha'chol ki meinan beturim machmas zeh me'on sham. But those who are doing this, even though the person who's getting distracted, Magilo, it's like he's got it coming to him because he was not careful about his sexuality, about keeping the holiness of his sexuality. But just that doesn't mean that the people who are doing it are going to be free from their own responsibility for doing such a terrible thing. Because they themselves, they're holy Jews, and they're pulling out their soul, their poor soul, they're pulling it out of the realm of holiness, and they're inserting themselves into a status of being dogs. So that's terrible. Rahman al-Islam. Bechinas va'klavim azei nafesh, as it says that the dogs are arrogant, and that's from Sefer Yeshayahu. Al yedei shecholkim al tfilasa. The fact that they have any type of objective to take away, to interfere, to disturb somebody's prayer. Even though, yes, it's true, the guy is like, he broke things, he's got to get them fixed. Because truly a person needs to work very hard to pray with all his strength. Even though he's on whatever level he's on, he did what he did, and even though he can't feel the sweetness of the prayer, just like we were saying. And this effort, as we said before, this effort that the person does exert, even when they're not feeling the sweetness, and even when they have come, they've lost their level of spiritual, of sexual purity, right? Even though they can't feel the sweetness and they've damaged themselves, but the fact that they try to pray is very precious. As it says in Tehillim, as because for the sake of you we killed ourselves all day. It's explained elsewhere. This is really funny. Now nobody's there. Of course they're going to be calling back in a second. How are you doing? You seem a little distracted today.
No.
What's happening? I'm going to cut this part of the recording out so you don't have to worry about that.
Oh, no, continue.
No, I'm waiting. I know any second they're going to be calling back. Is the thing. So while I'm doing this, I was just curious if you wanted to share why you're so distracted.
No, I'm distracted a lot anyway.
Well, but tonight you seem unusually distracted.
I went out with somebody lunch or Shabbat. I'm not attracted to her, but she's...
V'hine, od muvan midvarav zichrono v'racha, and we all can further understand from Rebbe Nachman's words in Likutei Moran in Likutei Moran Bet, chapter Torah 2. Asher kol pogim b'mris not li mimenu hatfila al yedei hizgavus machshavos zavos. He says over there that anybody who blemishes their bris has the power of prayer removed through them by the overwhelming machshavot zarot, the foreign thoughts that flash through a person's head when they're trying to pay attention to something and pray or focus on something, and then all the other thoughts keep attacking them. Shabayim levalbel tfilato, that come to distract from his prayer. V'chein katav sham b'siman lamed, and also Rebbe Nachman teaches in Torah lamed, asher kol habilbulim sheme'olam v'chol hashtutim v'chol irbuv da'at sheyesh la'adam v'chol hayom be'ezeh et sheyeh, that all of the distractions in the world, and all of the foolishnesses, and all of the confusion of awareness that a person has in each and every day, at each and every period of time, no matter what we're going through, we always go through these things. Hakol hashekel shel kol bat daika be'et atfilah, that most of these things happen when a person is trying to connect to God. The time of prayer. And that's when all these foreign thoughts attack the person and try to and distract him and confuse him, specifically, then they make themselves heard. Yashmiya kol dehilaso. That meaning to say, like it says in Tehillim. I'm sorry. He says this is what it says in Tehillim in Psalms. Mi yamalel gvuras Hashem. Meaning to say, Hainu mi shemimalel gvuras Hashem. The person who is speaking out Hashem's power. Meaning to say, is praying. Az yashmiya kol dehilaso. Then they will make themselves heard, all of his tahala. That means that there's tehillah can be praise, but in this case, Rebbe Nachman is saying this means all of his tahala, which is confusions, his unsettled thoughts, come and make themselves heard to him. All the different distractions and confusions. Kitala lishon irbuv uvilbuv, because this word tehillah can be read as tahala, which is a language of being mixed up and confused. As it says in Eov, yasim tahala, and for his work he'll place a confusion. Therefore, you need to really get yourself together and push and be strong to overcome these distracting thoughts at the time b'shas tefillah. Because that's the main time when it's going to happen. So now, what if that happens to you? How are you going to relate to that? You can either relate to it with frustration. Man, here's those negative thoughts that I can't stop them from happening. That's terrible. Or alternatively, you can look. Wow, I get a chance to see the way the spiritual world works. Here I am trying to pray, and all of a sudden I'm just bombarded with distracting thoughts. Watch this happen. And this should give you encouragement, not frustration. This should encourage you to show, the world of spirituality is true. Because a lot of times the reason we don't keep going is because we have doubts. Maybe it's not valuable what I'm trying to do. But we're saying here, if he's telling you that watch when you try to pray, how all the distractions are going to come to you, and then you're getting them, from that you can also say, well, if he's right about that, I guess he's right also about the fact that I'm trying to pray is extremely precious to Hashem. So that can encourage you. In the second book of Likutei Moharan, Torah 122, on the subject of these foreign thoughts that bombard a person during his prayer, because every single thought that we have comes from the side of darkness, the strange thought, foreign thought that attacks us during prayer, comes from the side of klipa, and it's called a koma shlema. It has a full spiritual structure. It means it's made up of all the different levels of everything that anything in this world that exists is called a koma shlema. It has a complete structure to it. So each thought is an aspect of an angel, as a malach, and it has a complete structure. When a person is trying to pray, he prays according to the order of the prayers. He just takes a siddur and he prays, and he goes through the siddur in each of the 19 prayers that he says, and he doesn't pay attention to the strange thoughts. By going through and just plowing through and saying the prayers and keep focusing on saying the words and not paying attention to the foreign thoughts, he actually knocks them down. For each one of these beings, these demonic beings that take the form of these foreign thoughts, by going through and saying the words of your prayer, you're actually cutting them and cutting on a leg off of this one and a hand off of this one, and you're wiping them out. You're doing battle. Like all the different limbs of these demonic entities that have a full structure and take the form in our experience as foreign thoughts. Come on. This is just the same way. Whatever you see in the physical world, you're also going to see something that's the same, that it's called Zelumat Zebar Elokim, that Hashem created this physical world and the spiritual world, that they have relationship, that they are in relationship to each other. So just like there's such a thing as physical war, there's also such a thing as spiritual war. So like for instance, when fearless, powerful warrior passes through a contingent of enemy soldiers, and these are evil murderers, and he's a powerful warrior for good, and he goes through. And as b'derech hilucho hu mapilotam. So as he's going through, he's swinging his sword, and each swing of the sword, he's killing one enemy, and disabling another enemy. It's exactly the same thing regarding prayer. When a person overcomes his distracting thoughts, and he makes himself pray, and he says the words in the Siddur according to the proper order of the prayer, and he doesn't pay any attention to these foreign thoughts that are trying to distract him. Or so he either kills them or he disables them. He makes them invalids. Cuts off a limb. Rebbe Nachman explains this more in other places. For instance, Torah 72. You don't need to pay attention to these thoughts at all. You don't have to try to stop them. A lot of times people have these thoughts coming in and they make a decision. I'm going to stop myself from thinking these thoughts. But that doesn't work, actually, because whenever we put our awareness on, we get more of it. So you don't pay attention. He says, don't pay attention to these thoughts at all. And don't worry about what you already went through. Don't turn back. Just keep going. According to the order in your prayer. And then these foreign thoughts, these distracting thoughts, will actually just go away. Because what happened? Because if a person does not ignore these things, so what, as we just said, what he's going to get is when he pays attention to them, they're going to get stronger. Just like a person who's trying to escape from something, and he looks behind him, he's looking, he looks over his shoulder to see the thing, and he realizes that every time he looks over, the thing's going to catch up a little bit more. This is the exact same thing in these types of foreign thoughts. Rebbe Nachman says further in another place that you can turn your thoughts however you want, so that a person has the power to control his thoughts. And even if a person's gotten weak, lazy with his thoughts, and he's not used to bringing his thoughts back into focusing on what he wants to focus on. Even so, he still can actually turn his thought. In the moment, he can actually say, okay, I'm going to think about something else. I'm going to think about saying my words of prayer. That's what I'm going to think of. This other thought that just came in about what I'm going to do with this woman, whether I should ask her out or not, all these types of thoughts that go on when we're in the middle of prayer, that we don't we don't pay attention to that. We can stop and we can say, okay, I'm going to make myself focus on saying these words. That's the way I'm turning my thoughts. And then you're going to see that the thoughts try to distract you more. And so you tell yourself, okay, no, I'm paying attention to this, and I'm thinking about Hashem, and I'm thinking about coming closer, and not worrying about this other thing. This other thing will take care of itself, and letting it go. Because it's absolutely impossible to keep two thoughts going at one time. And so he said, and that's Rebbe Nachman and also Rebbe Nachman. Therefore, when a person does strengthen himself and overcomes his tendency to want to look at the distracting thoughts and pay attention to them, rather he overcomes that and he makes himself think only about the words of the prayer, then certainly the foreign thought will be pushed away. I think this is a good place to pause for now. We're about halfway through this particular chapter. And so again, I bless us all that we should be zocheh to bring our thoughts into settled awareness that what we want to do is pray, and that we want to talk to Hashem every single day, and we want to do it in our informal way, but in our own words, and we want to do it in the formal way, in the Siddur, and may we be zocheh, may we merit that we should be strong in this, and push away the doubts, and push away the distractions. so that we can come to the true good that Hashem wants us to come to be able to taste the sweetness in the prayer and enjoy the relationship, just like you'd enjoy if you're in love with someone and you're having a conversation. There's a sweetness and a goodness that you have in the conversation with the person you love. So too may be will, Hashem, that we should experience our love with you to the point where we can have sweetness and great joy and delight in our conversations with you all the time. Ken Yatzah.